The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the parent to work through together. The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the coach to work through together. It was created in a sense and in a way to bridge the gap in communication between these parties and build a successful relationship dynamic. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/workbook or check out the show notes page and click on the link. And now, back to the show.
Being able to communicate is a skill that I think is underutilized.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's episode, I have Shannon M. Carlisle coming on. This is an incredible woman who created her Path to Purpose podcast. This is a podcast for current and former athletes. And I want to say welcome, Shannon, to the Sports Mastery podcast. Tell us what you're up to these days.
All right. Thank you, Deshaun, for having me on. It's good to be here. And these days, I am spending a lot of time with my family because that's something that's important to me, but also doing some things in the e-commerce space, as well as continuing to do some things with the Path to Purpose podcast, as you spoke about.
So what made you start the Path to Purpose podcast?
I started the Path to Purpose because initially, I was trying to get on other people's podcasts and on their show because I had a message of wanting athletes to understand their value outside of the sports arena so that once they're finished, they can move on with their lives and not be stuck in the past. And as I was trying to get on those shows, it was kind of difficult for me because, one, I played semi-pro, but I wasn't like a name or, a big time person. So they were like, who are you? What are you doing? So I was like, you know what? It's available these days. So I'm going to get my message out there however I can get it out. So I started the Path to Purpose and then realized that there were a lot of us out there and was like, you know what? This can be a platform for people athletes in particular, that want to get their message out there and want something to show for themselves when they go to maybe bigger shows. So I kind of equated to the Apollo Theater for athlete brands and companies.
I like that. I like that. I was interviewed by a gentleman when I was living in Portland, and my background is in training athletes. And from his show, I got some business. So, it encouraged me, it kind of raised my eyebrow. I've always wanted to, how could I deliver my message to more than the kids and the parents that's just coming to the building. And kind of like you, I just invested in a course and started the podcast. So I've been there with you, reaching out to get on other people's shows. And I just learned not to take it personally and then just keep going. So I think it's a common theme, but, you reached out to me, and for me, just reading, anybody that reaches out to me, I'm pretty much going to bring them on the show as long as it makes sense, because I appreciate the effort, I was listening to your podcast earlier. Before I go further, where usually I reserve this for the end, but I felt that your podcast is incredible, and it was the first time I've actually listened to it, and I can definitely appreciate it, and I look forward to listening to more of your work. But just tell my audience right now where they can find your podcast.
You can find it at www.thepathtopurpose.com. But if you couldn't get that, then you can just go to my Instagram, which is Shannon M. Carlisle, and just click on the link that's in the bio. But it's www.thepathtopurpose.com.
I'm telling you, you have to go check out her podcast. I'm really glad I brought her on the show. And I can tell you right now, if you have to, just stop and just go over to iTunes and rate this a 5-star and give us a positive rating and review, because now we're going to get into the heart of this matter. You started your podcast for the current and former athlete. And I see we have a lot of similarities. And I know when I was in school, I was really kind of unfocused, half into playing the sport, not really going to school, although I did figure out a way to graduate. But at the time, I wasn't focused. I know I could have went further academically outside of my undergrad degree, but I was partying, not focused, and really just my identity was just an athlete at the time. And I know I want to ask you, discuss your concept of reconnecting with the person behind the jersey.
That's good. Okay. So, kind of like you in that you were at school and you were playing sports. Like I was there and I was playing. You know how some people they go to school and then other people play sports and they kind of go to school? That was me. And
Right.
even though my parents had, they
Yep.
stressed education and all of these things, it was just something that I really loved. I really loved basketball. But let me get back to the question. The question you asked was, how do you reconnect to the person behind the jersey? There were a lot of things that I realized over time that I gave up or put on the back burner when I took an interest in sports, like fully when I was in high school. There was the creative side of me, the artistic side, the music side, like all of these things that I just didn't pursue or didn't keep up with myself while I was playing sports in college. And it wasn't because I didn't have time, and it wasn't because they weren't of interest to me. It was because I identified so much with being an athlete in my head, and I was very immature at the time, or immature in age. I was thinking that as an athlete, as a D1 athlete, this isn't something that you do. I don't go and do music. I don't go and do these creative things. I'm an athlete. I'm a jock. So I'm going to go and be in the gym and go in the weight room and do this. And that's what it's going to be. But when it was over, man, like, I was like, dang,
Right.
like, what am I supposed to do at this point? Because you spend so much of your time living in a sports dominated world that once you aren't that anymore, it's hard to reconnect and remember all of those things that you used to really enjoy, or even be curious enough to find some other interests. And it's something that happens over time.
Right. That was one of the things that really impressed me with your last episode when Asha Santi was talking, just like she really explores her whole creative side. And I have some similarities. Like I love video editing, podcasting is one, and now I'm in the t-shirt industry where I'm learning that whole trade from top to bottom right now. So I definitely appreciate what you have going on and the types of people that you're bringing on to your podcast. I feel like it's really inspiring and authentic because I can listen to other people's shows and they might have some good material, but the authenticity just isn't there. And that was the first thing I noticed. One, you reaching out to me and then listening to your most recent episode. Going back to what you were saying, I know when I was in school, honestly, I didn't have any goals. I thought I wanted to graduate. The whole thing is I'm living a dream. I'm trying to be like Bo Jackson. I'm trying to go to the NFL. And at the end of the day, I wasn't objective about, where my skill level really was, the things that I needed to work on. I knew what my strengths and weaknesses were, but I didn't know how to fix those weaknesses, which further led me to playing some semi-pro football. And then I was fortunate enough to play on a few different indoor teams, but I really wish I could have accomplished so much more in college. And, the sports mastery program is about helping the student athlete on and off the court field diamond, and, we talk about goals. We talk about visualizing. We discuss getting over your fears. We discuss social intelligence, emotional intelligence. When it comes to goals, developing goals that match your bigger vision, how do you explain that, to the athletes or former athletes that you might be working with right now, or
What's
what
interesting
would
is
be your
that
message to them?
by profession, I'm a teacher. And so, like, I'll teach all day, and then I just understand that, I teach younger kids, but when you're trying to impart something to somebody, it's hard for them to to just take your word for it, And even because I was a point guard, even as a point guard, one of my biggest strengths was that I led by example, like on the court, off the court, all of that, character, all of those things. And when it comes to what I do now with talking to athletes, or whether it's writing or speaking to them in some capacity, I literally just lead by example, because what I've learned so far is that people don't like being told what to do, which is fine. But at the same time, they want to know that you've been in their shoes, you've done something that can help them get to the next level where they are. So a lot of times I'll point them in a direction of a book that I found was helpful for me, or I will like create some kind of spreadsheet or something that can help them manage their time. A lot of the things that I talk about aren't, how do you say, like super concrete, because the things that have mattered the most after I got out of sports and stopped playing competitively was how I managed my time. And as you were talking about setting goals that matched a bigger vision, like a lot of people that I speak to, or that I've tried to speak to, push athletes straight towards entrepreneurship. But if that's not what they want to do, I'm not going to try to set them on that path, because that's just making yourself identified as this other thing that you don't want to do. So it's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of time management, goal setting, and even goal setting is cliche to me, but making sure that your intentions match how you actually want to live. So that's what I focus on, and that kind of equates to the behind the jersey. Like, how do you want to live? How do you want these next 60, 70, 80 years to go?
You mentioned books.
I would recommend High Performance Habits by Brenda Burchard, and The One Thing, and I believe that's by Gary Keller.
Yeah, I've heard of those. I'll link those in the show notes too.
There was a quote in there that said this: financially wealthy people are those who have enough money coming in without having to work to finance their purpose in life. Okay? Now, that right there lets you know you don't have to be a millionaire, trillionaire, billionaire if you can finance your purpose in life and still have a good quality of life that is important to you. That's all that matters. I think a lot of people get caught up in the amount, when if you think about how you actually want to live and how you want life to go, you can kind of focus differently when it comes to finances. So the thing that stood out the most in The One Thing was that it helps you focus on what it actually is that you want life to be about, so that anything other than that is a distraction and it doesn't take you off course.
I recently interviewed an individual that he had a tremendous path leading to Oklahoma State University, where he came out of Grapevine, Texas, and then went to actually Abilene Christian Division II school, redshirted there, played his redshirt freshman year, then later transferred, went out to Foothills Community College, played one season, and then got invited to walk on at Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. Like, just a tremendous down-to-earth kid, and didn't earn a scholarship, made it, I think, as far as second team, but he wanted the D1 experience, and I could talk to 100 kids in the room. They're all going to raise their hand and say that they want to play D1. I have some incredible sophomores that I'm working with right now. And right now, my intentions when we're talking is teaching them the importance of communication, nonverbal communication, interpersonal communication, what certain coaches look for, and then really beginning to get them mature enough to ask the tough questions, because, them being sophomores going into their junior season, they're going to be the class of 2020. And I'm like, you got to get ready to negotiate a scholarship, Are you going to sign, are you going to have them guarantee you 4 years? Or are you going to be one of the individuals who sign 1 year contracts every year, and where you could be in a topsy-turvy type of situation? You have to maintain your grades, you have to maintain your conduct. But I am getting them because like I know that coaches, recruiters, they do an extensive amount of research. So I'm encouraging my kids to do research on the school. What have they done for the last 4 years? Has it been 4 years of winning or 4 years of losing? Because right now, if you go either way, there's going to be a job change at some point. So you have to understand the cycles that they're going to be in. So, it's about communicating clearly, and I know that's one of your strong suits is talking about or discussing the importance of communicating clearly.
You just talked about the nonverbal communication, and I think that is super important, especially when it comes to uh, interviews after school, but also when you go on those college visits and you go to these places where the thing is, you never know who you're sitting next to. And if you're able to communicate your value clearly and you're able to demonstrate and communicate what you can bring to the table, then you never know the person that's right next to you. They might be a booster. They might be somebody connected to a school that you want to go to. It might be someone that's looking for someone to be an intern. It might be somebody who's looking to fill a position. It might be somebody who is interested in something that you're interested in that isn't sports related. And because you've communicated yourself in such a way that is enticing and admirable, there are a lot of opportunities that can come from that. And I know some athletes are closed off, or they don't want to share a whole lot, or they don't want to talk a lot for whatever reason. But being able to communicate is a skill that I think is underutilized.
Right now for the football athlete, the high school football athlete, is camp season, is 7-on-7 season. And this past weekend, I had a gentleman that I work with that's in my sports mastery program. He went to a showcase camp on Saturday, and then yesterday he was at the Oregon State football camp. On the Saturday camp, there's 500 kids there. And I'm like, and I told him what this is going to be like. Like, how do you stand out? You're going to have 12 different schools there, coaches. How are you going to stand out? You have to hustle from station to station. You have to sit up front when they're talking, be attentive, get as most work as you can as possible. And over the last several months, we've been talking about having his business cards made. And he had all of his business cards, and he gave his business cards out to every single coach that was there. Yesterday, he goes to the Oregon State camp. He comes home, opens his email, and Portland State invites him to his camp. And, that was him giving out his information and figuring out a way to be memorable.
That sometimes it's not a grand thing that makes the difference. It's that you did something small that somebody else doesn't do.
I like Jim Collins, his book, Good to Great. I'm a fan of Robert Greene and his material. Lately I've been reading Daniel Goleman's material, his book on emotional intelligence. And after that, he has one on social intelligence. I'm going to dive into that. And all of this, it comes back to influencing people.
When it comes to influence is subtle. So it can go one way or it can go the other way. But a lot of people think that it's like a big bang thing and it just happens all at once. But influence is something that happens every day in small increments over time. So if a person is wanting to have an influence on other people, whether it be through coaching or through writing books or however they want to have some kind of influence, whatever medium they choose, is something that is going to happen incrementally over time. So somebody who wants to have influence, they have to be somebody who has some kind of character, has something that they want to to convey to the world, or convey to, maybe it's not the world that big, but their community, and then stick by it and stick with it over time.
I wanted to ask you, who's influenced you the most?
You know, me and my family, we're a really close knit bunch. And when it came to anything that I wanted to do, my family was always there. So I'll say, like, my parents, I have two cousins that are like my sisters, and I looked up to them and saw the things that they were doing, and I wanted to be successful like them. And my mom always told me that, she never told me that I couldn't do something. And when I wanted to do something adventurous, she would always, with caution, be like, you know what, baby, go for it. My dad always instilled confidence in me. And to be honest, when it came to doubts after my sports career was over, it was a period of time where I suffered in silence, and I didn't really share it with anybody. I kind of just went through the motions and pretended like everything was going well. But I was dying inside, I was lost. And I ended up becoming a part of this organization. I'm not going to say the name of it, but there was a guy and his wife named Mr. and Mrs. Bell, and they really took me under their wing and shared with me all the things about figuring out how you wanted life to go and your goals, and a lot of, for lack of a better word, like motivational things, and just self-work. Like, that's what did it. So my family, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Bell.
Yeah, I was listening to your last interview with Asha Santi, and she kind of mentioned the same thing. And, and then hearing you say that, I've internalized before myself. What would you say to the student athlete who might internalize like that and suffer like in silence?
I know it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but writing and journaling actually, like, physically releases those things out of your brain and puts it on paper. The last thing I would say is, a lot of things when it comes to life after sports is trial and error. You don't have to jump straight into this one thing and then go full speed onto it. Curiosity is, no, wait. Passion is curiosity on fire. So when you're looking for that next passion or that next thing that you want to get involved in, you should try a lot of different things. And as we all know, we all fail, but that's cool. You move on to the next thing. Once you feel that thing in you that is like, you're like, yeah, I want to keep doing that, then you can, go ahead and dive some more into it. But I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself into one thing.